Oh, welcome. Today, we are talking all about math. We love literacy and we talk a lot about literacy, but today, we're going to get some number sense to go with the rest of our sense. Come on back with us. Go. Oh, welcome back to another session of the South Star Classroom. That's David. I'm Charles. How you doing today, man?
Doing good, doing good. Good to be here with you. We're going through some weather right now in Southern California. We have what are the remnants of Hurricane K, which for all you meteorologists out there, came up on the Pacific side of the Baja California, and it's kind of spinning up and out into the Pacific right now. But it's been super humid, rainy. We need the rain. I'm not complaining, but the climate is definitely changing. This is not normal behavior for September, Southern California.
Man, well,
Yeah.
prayers for you and your family. That sounds like a lot, but hopefully everything works out. I am really excited about this topic today. This is a topic that you chose, and I'm really glad that you chose it. Can you let these folks know what we're talking about and why?
Yeah, today we're going to talk about a couple of things. And before we jump in, let me look here on the yard here, the yard of the streams. All right, we got some folks in the chat. If you are here with us, Bill and Mama Toya, thank you for being here. Make sure that you smash the like button. Go ahead and share this with your networks. We're going to talk about, I was thinking about this, Dr. Cole. We got a Latino and an African-American males talking about math on a live podcast.
Yeah,
Probably
man.
not something that you get too often, but that's how we do it here at the South Star Classroom. So today we are going to talk about mathematics. We talk a lot about literacy, and literacy is critically important. We've had many discussions about literacy, certain states, and California not being one of them, but other states and networks and schools are focusing a lot on literacy, primarily for our younger children, Black and brown children, special education children. It's the right thing to do. And today we want to raise the flag and make sure that we're paying attention to mathematics as well, which we know is also a subject that students take all the way throughout throughout K-12. And so we're going to talk about the importance of math. We're going to talk about some of the things that have been happening in California and San Francisco in particular, with some interesting, I don't know if I would call them innovative ways that people are thinking about redesigning math frameworks and math curriculum. So we'll stop
Man,
there.
I'm really interested in hearing about that. And Mama Toya just asked about Tejas, otherwise more known as Omar. Omar's traveling today. He was trying to make it, but he's on the road. And he give him some prayers, but he's doing well, and he'll be back with us when he can be. He just wasn't available today. But yes, math. So I like this because one, literacy is just super important, and it's like the lower hanging fruit, right? It's like, that's, as a Black person, that's the thing that you can get an appendage cut off if they saw you reading or teaching somebody else how to read, right? It was like so taken from us. We both feel very, very strongly about it, both English, native languages, whatever the case is. And math, I think I look at math also as a language. That's how it was taught to me. I was taught math by Mr. Brown at Westlake Junior High School, who just retired, but he taught that to me as the universal language of the language that regardless of where you're from, these numbers and these theorems, they work. There's a universal law that doesn't really know boundaries the same way that spoken language always does. So I always thought that was really interesting. And so for the people that love literacy, rock with us on the math thing. And then we got a little special surprise for all the people that hate new math. But I think we have to break down when people say new math. We have to break down why there's a disconnect and why it's important that this switch was actually made.
Yep. All right. So going back to the beginning of this conversation, I'm going to do two things. I collected some data on what's happening in California, and so I
Mhm.
just want to kind of share that to set the stage. So we talk about the literacy crisis, and we know that that is in fact a very real thing. And what we don't talk about enough is the math crisis. So
Right.
as a whole, the United States, we are ranked at about 37th out of
Wow.
79 industrialized countries in math. So 37 out of 79 industrialized countries in the world for math achievement
My
amongst 15
goodness.
year olds. So looking just at 15-year olds, okay? In the United States, California has historically been below average, performing in the lowest quarter or quartile, so the lowest 25%,
Okay.
right? And then we know what happens when we break that out into looking at achievement for female students, for Black students, for brown students, for low income students. That's where you start to see the achievement gap even worsens the results for students of color in California and for girls. Um, so we have a crisis, and there are a couple of different ways of going about this crisis. Um, I'll put that out there first. And then second, what I want to do is I want to preface this conversation with some of my own personal history. I spent many years as a teacher. I don't talk a lot about it on this show. I talk about the fact that I taught social science, but I also taught high school math. I taught um, a ninth grade in Oakland, a fundamentals of math course that we created from the ground up. I taught pre-algebra, I taught algebra, and I taught geometry and algebra 2. So I've
Okay.
actually have time in the classroom working with low income Black and brown students in East Oakland in a very under resourced school, and so and this is also under a different accountability framework time, going back to No Child Left Behind, right?
Mhm.
So currently we have what are called the Common Core Standards,
Right.
and the
I'm
way
gonna
that
have a
we
lot of
expect,
questions for you, just as
yeah,
a
yeah,
yeah, because I'm really
yep,
interested in, especially when Common Core came. I'm interested in a few
yep,
different things. So let me let you finish, and then I'll jot down my question for
yep.
you.
And so now we have a new math framework nationally, and then states kind of adopted their own, but it's all essentially based on Common Core, right? It's a different way of approaching problem solving, focusing less on the product and more on the process, if you will. But so there's that. So I'm going to definitely pull in some of my own personal experience, and really, Charles, what we're talking about is and you're familiar with this because you've done work in California and in Oakland specifically around this A through G college
Mhm.
curriculum, right? There are certain, by the time you're a senior in high school, there are certain math classes that you need to have with a
Man.
passing grade in order to qualify for the A through G, which makes you eligible for the UC or the CSU, right? And so essentially, if you can't reach, I think algebra 2,
Right.
you're out, right?
Well, yes
Um,
and no. I mean, we've lowered the bar, so you can get away
yep.
with you can get away with just a 3 years. So it just has to
Okay.
fit. So you can go algebra, geometry. Sometimes it's algebra 2, sometimes it's
Like a discrete
trig.
mathematics or something else.
Yeah,
Okay.
like they've built in new courses
Yeah.
that I think actually I don't know. I don't want to say what other people should and shouldn't have, but I do think
Yep.
that they've kind of lowered the bar on which you can take. So yeah.
We need to get that rap air horn sound effect. So every time we say lower the bar, we can hit the rap
Oh, I
air
got
horn.
one. I'll have it loaded up on the board next time. And just for the
Okay.
record, Toya, thank you for being here, William, and Misty
Yep.
Cross. Misty, oh my God. I listen, man. I love me some Misty, man. When I was
All right.
when I was working in Oakland, I worked in the superintendent's office, and we would, I was the community guy because I was from there, and she would just always show up, and we always just had a really good rapport, even when we
Yep.
disagreed. But she was just there with so much passion. I love that lady,
Yep.
man. I would do.
So
That's my homie. Go ahead. I just had to.
fantastic.
I had a moment. So
Yeah, you
I'm
give a
glad
shout
she's
out.
here.
Thank you, Misty, for being here. And Miss Mama Toy, I see your comment. I'll definitely get there. Keep the comments and the questions coming in. We're heading in that direction. And
I'm gonna give you the
so,
full screen.
thank you.
It's somebody at the
Thank you.
door, but I'm gonna give you the full screen. So you keep going until I get back. You got it.
Okay. Yep. And so what we're looking at is essentially the big issue is where people focus a lot of their energy and attention on, and especially in California with the new math framework, is what's happening in high schools and to some extent middle school, right? A really big question around where the math course Algebra 1 should be offered. Some say it should be offered in 8th grade as an option. Some say not until 9th grade. And what we're dealing with essentially are a bunch of different students that are coming from a variety of backgrounds that have different levels of preparation for different types of math courses, right? Every child is not the same. Every child does not have the same access to high quality or low quality education. And so when they come to high school, students are ready. Not all students are ready for a 9th grade level mathematics course.
Right.
And so that, and so what we're essentially, what the state of California is trying to do is change what happens in high school and maybe move away from tracking students. You're in a college mathematics track. You're in a graduation mathematics track. Whatever it happens to be. And so, at the end of the day, you have students that might be ready for advanced math that can't take it because it's not offered. And we don't want to put students into classes that they are not ready for also, just to say that you're enrolling kids in higher level classes. You're setting kids up to fail. So my point here is that we're focusing a lot around math instruction, around our historically poor outcomes that are tracked, and you can see achievement gaps like you can in literacy and English language arts, but we're only talking about high school. Okay. So rewind to my time teaching in a high school in East Oakland, and also being a principal of a high school in East Oakland. We served students 9th through 12th grade at Oakland Unity High School. And we had kids coming in from a variety of middle schools and elementary schools. We knew what schools were preparing kids with the basics. These kids are going to be ready for a 9th grade algebra class. Many of our students showed up with sorely lacking basic number sense fundamentals, right?
And let's tell people what number sense is. Yep. I mean, I got the definition, but if you want to explain it, I can do the definition. You can explain it.
Yeah, number sense is essentially it's like kind of the foundation of one of the foundations of mathematics, one of the pillars.
Right.
It's the ability to understand and interpret numbers and the values that are assigned to those numbers.
Right.
It could be symbolically, it could be numerically. Right. It's kind of the core of it. Does that match up with what you
Yeah. What I had was number sense is a group of skills that allow people to work with numbers. These skills are key to doing math, but also many other tasks, right? So again, so when you talk about literacy and then we talk about math, and I think a lot of people just think of this in terms of school, and it's not just in terms of school. You have to there are the same way literacy is a strong foundation for just how to understand the world, logic, and things like that. So is number sense, right? And I'll give a few examples because I think that's where schools tend to fail. Like they'll talk about Pythagorean theorem, but they won't really talk about the real life application of why this is important, right? But if you're a young person and you like money, there's a lot of number sense that if you understand that, you know what I mean? So I had a lot of friends that were not traditionally good at math, but they were really quick with money. I've seen it in sports too, right? Like I love basketball, but especially for you baseball fans where it's super stat heavy, like a lot of people learn number sense in those ways. And if you watch basketball now, you'll see, or if you watch Thursday Night Football, they'll talk about how quick Josh how he had Josh Allen had to get the ball out because number 55 on the other side was very, very, very fast. And if he didn't get it out, he'd get hit. And so these are things that are like rooted in logic. It's not just about a grade. Being able to read isn't just about being able to graduate high school the same way number sense isn't either. It will help you make sound decisions. And I'll show a few examples later. So that's what I have for number sense.
Yeah, what you're talking about is the difference between a decontextualized, abstract math function Like, why do I need to know what 3x, equals 12 and solve for x? That makes no sense to
Mhm.
me. Versus actually understanding a real life problem where you may have to apply those particular numbers and variables and in that
Mhm.
particular kind of way, right?
Mhm. Oh,
And
and
so
David,
it's yes,
I
yes,
cut
sir.
you off again. I'm sorry. You have
Yeah,
to let me address this with Misty. This is so ironic because it's dump the
yeah,
D. And this is the policy that I wrote with energy converters that has gotten twisted to be something else. So I love that she posted this. Can I just answer her
yep.
real quick? So
Go for it. Yeah,
Missy,
yeah,
hopefully you can hear me, but stay here. Don't lose your point, David.
yeah, yeah.
So dump the D is basically it was not to get rid of the D grade. When we talked about dump the D, it was helping parents understand that how detrimental a D was for Black and brown students that wanted to go to college, more specifically the UC and CSU route. We have, so for instance, there's a high school in Oakland that's graduated 95% of Black kids, and they'll pump that up, but only 40% of those kids are eligible for A through G. When we built Dump the D, it wasn't by itself. We were trying to build an apparatus where parents like Misty or Jamoke or anybody else would get a warning and say, listen, your child is on track of getting a D, which is almost worse than an F because it's going to be harder for them to get summer school. It wasn't like if a child earns a D, they should get a D, but it was better communication and better talking to parents. So many of our Black kids and brown kids don't get trapped thinking that they're eligible for something that they're not. And then what happened was they started to get some pushback, and the district did what the district does, and it turned into something else. But it was supposed to be dump the D was also supposed to be it was also supposed to have along with it was um like on the transcript and report card, it was supposed to be like a red light or a yellow light that would indicate to a parent, hey, something's actually really wrong here and you need to get involved. You need to understand what's happening. And we felt that that wouldn't cost the district any money at all. It's just better communication and would require parental just involvement. So I've been working with them around it and trying to just not lower standards. I never want to lower standards in education. I do want our teachers and our system to be better. So if your kid is getting a D in a major class that they need, a parent is brought in earlier, or that kid knows what's at
Yep.
stake, and maybe we'll help them get back on track. I just wanted to
Yep.
address that because I thought that was important. It was really to inform parents, and it was just about better communication. I do not want to see standards dropped. I want to see the bar raised on our system. You know what I'm saying? Because our kids are the ones that suffer from that. And we just started like graduating people. So hopefully that made sense. Go ahead, man.
You get a double rap air horn for raising the bar.
Yes. But the district, and again, I appreciate them taking it on, but this is where you have to listen, and you have to stand your ground when people take the whole policy, not just the D part, take the policy around getting report cards and transcripts signed when a kid is out of A through G compliance. So a parent is triggered and knows. I was just in Oakland a few days ago. Like hardly none of the kids even knew what A through G was. And it was a lot of sophomores and if they didn't know, even less parents knew. So
so I think this dump the D thing is a good example. So you're talking about like a policy change,
right?
This new math framework.
Yeah.
San Francisco Unified piloted a new math framework. Turns out it wasn't as effective as they thought. The state of California is now looking at a math framework to make access to mathematics courses more equitable. But really, we're in my opinion, in my humble opinion, in my experienced opinion, we're focusing on the wrong problem. I think that the policy is part of it, but what we don't talk enough about, I mean, we're barely starting to talk about. You talk about the literacy curriculum wars that are going crazy.
Right.
Like these people have like two jobs: teach math, teach reading, and it's still unclear as to what is the most effective approach to teach a child to read. People are still arguing about that. Don't get me started on math. So my issue here is that we talk about mathematics, we talk about how to repair mathematics, how to make access to mathematics courses more equitable. What we should be talking about is access to high quality
Yes.
mathematics instruction in
Yes.
the early elementary years, using assessments, using data, working with parents, and doing what we essentially do with literacy. And that's like paying attention to how students develop academically, not just along this reading continuum, but also along this numeracy, number sense, and basic core math fundamental continuum. Because without that, if you have a student show up to a high school ninth grade without a solid math foundation, you're dealing with two issues. You're dealing with a student that is not able to complete basic mathematics functions, right? You can actually work with that. The other thing that you're dealing with is a young person that has gone through a school system, perhaps not expected to learn something, knows they haven't been taught it, and they have to grind through, all these courses. And these are the things that lead, young people to disenfranchise from school. It leads to dropout rates, the push out rates, when students know that they're in school, they should be learning, and they're not being taught. Young people know.
Right.
And so now you have to go back in and do this thing. If you can do it, you have to reignite the fire of young people whose fire has been blown out year after year after year. And so you have to actually do this social emotional support work to help students once again believe that they can achieve in math, and then teach them good, solid, sound practices around math fundamentals.
And I'm gonna stay there and build on it, right? And it also helps with their understanding of logic. Like this math thing doesn't just work because it's magic, okay? Like there is a logical sense that if you can grasp this concept, it will help you out in life, right? So like for instance, so when we switched to Common Core, I think one of the issues is that a lot of teachers that had to teach it also did not understand it. They also didn't understand, okay, I know long division, but they didn't understanding how numbers work and interchange and interlock with each other. They didn't understand. They couldn't describe it. And we found this guy online, and I'll show a bit of him, and he just truly understands number sense. So he's taking these very complicated things, but he's showing you how they work in real life. So it's okay, if you're trying to make X decision, this is how this works. So you don't have to, sometimes you got to do math in your head. And as somebody, a lot of people struggle with math, and I'm watching this brother, and this brother he's so good at it that he's making me want to go back and learn all this stuff from his class, like regular 8th grade, 9th grade algebra, and the principles. Maybe I should just show one. How about that? What'd you think?
Let's do it. Let's see one.
Yeah, let's see one. His name is Howie Hua. He teaches in Fresno, actually. And this is him doing a real life situation, but helping young people understand number sense and why this is important. And the funny thing is, it's supposed to be aimed at young people. I really think it's a lot of adults that's using this.
In case you didn't know this visual, bar models really help in math. Say that 40% of a cost is $60, and you want to know the full price. You can definitely solve it algebraically, but if you want a visual way, here's one way that we can do that. So you can draw a rectangle and say, well, if 40% is $60, then what's the entire thing worth? And you could break these into smaller boxes. You could break 40% into two 20%, 2 boxes total $60, so you know that each of these boxes represent $30. And since each box represents $30, the original price is $150. Now, what I like about bar models is that it helps with estimation. For example, someone can say that they already know that the original price is greater than $120, because if 40% is $60, then they could just double it, so 80% is $120. And another benefit of this is that people can solve this in multiple ways. For example, someone can solve it this way, someone can break it up into 10% sections, someone can break it up into 40%, 40%, 20%, or another way. So if you haven't used a bar model before, I strongly recommend it. You can start with these. Now, it's not the friendliest to use in every single situation, but it's definitely a visual to keep in mind.
Now, listen, we'll come back to him in a little bit, right? But the thing about that's so interesting is how many families are tightening their belt right now? How many people are feeling the effects of gas increase, everything, groceries, clothes, all that stuff. So if you're at home and you're in charge of your budget, like understanding this basic number sense, right? Of like, okay, there's a 40% increase on milk. Yep. I need, and our budget is only this. You know what I mean? Like, this is what we're talking about. And he just did a whole lesson in like 2 minutes. So of course, if you were in a classroom, you're going to stretch that out. That can be a whole, what, David? If you're coaching a teacher, I don't know how long you'd make that block, but it's really understanding the relationship of percentages, the bar, numbers, but it's not just like numbers on a page, right? It's like, okay, this is how much groceries is going up and you make $150. You got $150 to spend. What can you get? What can't you get? And if you learn that in the 8th, 9th, 10th grade, right, things are going to be very different for you later on in life. The same way, if you understand language and literacy is not just being able to read words. It is being able to read words, understand them, and utilize them to get the things that you need, right? So you understand what I'm saying? So it's like literacy and numeracy are foundational for our society. It's not just about a grade. But if you're a teacher and you don't understand that yourself and you don't understand this new way of doing it, if you can't comprehend yourself, you know what I mean? You're going to see more people say, well, I don't like this new math. I don't like this stuff. And right now, watching this young man, I'm jealous. And I had a really good math teacher. Actually, Mr. Brown was great. But after Mr. Brown, it went back to that other way. And no shade to those other people. They just were not masters at the craft of understanding numbers. And so this is where teaching is really important. So David, you as somebody who ran schools, you as somebody who's been in charge of teachers, and what would you do in a school where your teachers are really struggling to deliver math, to deliver like the basic understanding of like a mathematical concept, like what we just saw?
Yeah, I mean, so I've taught in and was the principal of a high school in East Oakland when we were still operating under, the California state standards during No Child Left Behind. I'll talk about that. And I also was a principal head of school at a Montessori public charter in Oakland that served TK through 8th grade students. So I've been the principal and been involved in schools at different grade levels under these different, I wouldn't say accountability frameworks, but like academic standard frameworks, right? And I think it really breaks down, the same for both. I don't want to like get hung up on Common Core or non-Common Core. I think what it breaks down to, Charles, is, and I saw some of this in the comments. Thank you for being here, Jamoke Hinton. Talking about does every adult in the building, do they carry the belief that every child in that school can succeed academically? That's where you start, right? It could be science, history, physical education, foreign language, whatever it is. Like, do you have a fundamental belief that all children in your school, in your community, have the gift, the talent, and the ability to achieve? That's the starting point. That's the interview. That's the first question of the interview. And if you stall in answering that question, like, we're done. We're moving on to the next because we got 4 more people waiting in line, right? So I think that's really the core of it. Then once you have adults on board, right, then you can start the work of crafting and designing your instruction to whatever standard framework exists and way of teaching. I think our colleges and universities absolutely have to do a better job of teaching teachers how to actually teach fundamentals and teach less about some of the non-connected things that they're teaching about, which I won't get into. But like, I went through a teaching program in California. Did I learn how to actually the fundamentals of teaching? Nope, not at all. I learned about a whole bunch of other stuff that I already knew about. So I think that's a huge challenge. Quick story: when I was at Oakland Unity High School, and this is around the mid 2000s, we academically as a school were one of the highest performing high schools in Oakland, probably like top 1, top 2 for Black and brown kids, and pretty high in terms of the state, comparing schools that are working with Black and brown children. Our sore spot was always math, and we knew it. And so what did we do? We focused on math achievement. We identified a new curriculum. We partnered with, we brought in online platforms. We were one of the first schools to pilot the Khan Academy, definitely in the Bay Area and in the country. We tweaked our schedules. Kids had a double math class. They had an online math class and a math class with a teacher. We did before school, after school. And there's a book about this that one of my math teachers wrote. It was a belief that our children could achieve. Charles, within 2 years, we went from a low performing math school to one of the highest in the state of California for Algebra 1, 9th grade. And these are kids that are coming in from all walks of life. So to say that it can't be done, I call your BS. I think it's hard if you're a big system, but you have to start with the fundamental belief that it can be done. And we did it at Oakland Unity. Our kids, we had the highest 10th grade math scores for the exit exam. How do you do it? How did you do this? We teach children. We align our curriculum to standards, and we assess them, and we give them what they need, right? And my point being here is it's hard work. It's not rocket science. It's really about a will, because we know that there's a way. The second role that I had was at a TK through 8 Montessori school, and I got to see literacy and math number sense development from the earliest grades. Some of our TK kids were like 4 and a half. These are little babies, And so for them, it looks very different, but that's the foundation. If you're not doing the deep work, and so now I'll get to one of Ms. Toya's comments earlier, partnering with families and communities to say, like, here's our curriculum. Here's what it looks like. This is what Montessori public education looks like, for primary, for lower elementary, for upper elementary, and for middle school. And we would bring families in to provide them with demonstration lessons. Here are things that you can do at home with your child to reinforce what they're doing in school. So we did work with families in the community around how they could be better equipped at home to teach and support their students. We also communicated regularly around academic performance. And that should be a non-negotiable for any public school system, at least 3 times a year. Outside of a handwritten narrative, we're like, I'm a teacher. I know my kids. Your kid's doing great. I actually want to see some hard data. Show me some assessment data, right? And then we also walk parents through how to read and understand and interpret the results of the report cards and progress reports and NWEA reports that we were giving to them. So it's deep work. It's like step by step. You don't get too far ahead. You don't get too far behind. But especially in those early elementary years, that's the work that you have to do if you're really committed to ensuring that you're closing achievement gaps, and that all kids, regardless of their background, are not just performing well, but they're also achieving. You're on mute, my friend.
I was Shakespearean and y'all missed it. I said the dopest stuff ever. I can't ever say it again. You missed it. But I love how you focused it on school and achievement. And let me bring it back into like outside of school and like just in general in real life, right? Like when I say that this is also a foundation for logic, right? When you think of like equity, a lot of that stuff comes from a math equation. So like when you think of a math equation, if it's 10x equals 50, and I know in order to find out x, I have to divide by 10. I have to divide by 10 on both sides. What I do to one side, I need to do for another side. If I understand how number lines work, right? Distance is distance. So if I add 5 on a number line to each side, the distance might still be the same, and I can operate within that apparatus. Let me give you an example of what I mean, how understanding number sense makes us a smarter society. COVID is something that just happened. Actually, and a lot of us have had people in our family group or in our conversations or whatever, people that we love. Hell, it might even be you that's listening that was like, well, the vaccine is actually hurting more people who are doing this. And a lot of that logic is because a lot of folks don't understand number sense. So let me go back to Howie one more time and watch how he utilizes number sense to help explain this to the people, right?
There are news sources out there that are going to give you a lot of probabilities. So I wanted to do my part in explaining the difference between these two probabilities, the probability of vaccinated given infected, and the probability of infected given vaccinated. The first one can mislead you. The second one paints a clearer picture of what's happening. So imagine a population of 100 people where 90 are vaccinated and 10 are not vaccinated. And there are 4 infections, 3 that are vaccinated, 1 that's not. The probability of vaccinated given infected is 75% because 3 out of the 4 are vaccinated. So this is misleading because people can say, oh, look, 75%, the vaccine's not working. But remember, this number is going to go higher as more people are getting vaccinated. So this number cannot be reliable. Instead, we should be comparing these two probabilities. The probability of infected given vaccinated, that's 3 out of 90, that's a little over 3%. And the probability of infected given not vaccinated, that's 10%. That's 1 out of 10 people. So we should be comparing these two probabilities.
Sorry, they said they couldn't hear it. Let me start it over. Can you all hear it now? I'm sorry.
And remember,
No, you can hear it. They said they couldn't hear it.
Out there that are going to give you a lot of probabilities. So I wanted to do my part in explaining the difference between these two probabilities, the probability of vaccinated given infected, and the probability of infected given vaccinated. The first one can mislead you. The second one paints a clearer picture of what's happening. So imagine a population of 100 people where 90 are vaccinated and 10 are not vaccinated. And there are 4 infections, 3 that are vaccinated, 1 that's not. The probability of vaccinated given infected is 75% because 3 out of the 4 are vaccinated. So this is misleading because people can say, oh, look, 75%, the vaccine's not working. But remember, this number is going to go higher as more people are getting vaccinated. So this number cannot be reliable. Instead, we should be comparing these two probabilities. The probability of infected given vaccinated, that's 3 out of 90, that's a little over 3%. And the probability of infected given not vaccinated, that's 10%. That's 1 out of 10 people. So we should be comparing these two probabilities instead of looking at probability of vaccinated given infected. And remember, the most important data out there is that vaccines prevent death. That is the purpose of the vaccine, and data has shown that the vaccines are working in that regard.
So do you see, like, let me bring him down real quick. Do you understand what I'm talking about when I say it's a basis for logic? So because most people don't understand how general probability works, they're looking at numbers and they're looking at it wrong. And to be very fair to the general populace, news people don't always understand it either. And so they exacerbate. So that's a Fox News stat, right? Well, it's actually not that effective or whatnot, right? But if you don't understand number sense and you don't understand that one way that we're showing you, that's going to change. We're looking at something long, but when you go in the longer game, you're going to see how effective this thing is. I'll give one more real life example for me. A lot of people say, well, Charles, what was your strategy for being an entrepreneur and the projects you take on? And I said this. I said, I read somewhere that people try to accomplish 2 to 3 things a day, and most of them fail. So if I'm going to play the numbers game, I'm going to try to accomplish 20 or 30 things a day. Now I'm going to fail, but in my failure, the absolute, if I only get a third done, if the regular person only gets a third done out of 3 things, they have accomplished 1 thing. If I get a third done out of the 30 things that I was trying to do, that's 10 things. And then that's an absolute value. I utilize logic to build out everything that you see me build. So from when you met me, David, to when I was just working at the district, or I was working with teachers, or I was doing these things, I thought about, okay, what do I like about working at the district? What don't I like? What did I like about being a social worker? What didn't I like? And then I started to put those things in mathematical equations, and then I built what I have. Now I fail way more than I succeed, but because I play the probabilities of things, I win a lot more. You know, you get what I mean? Like, I'm playing with a different type of house money, but my logic and my strategy is built in understanding and using number sense and logic, right? Like,
absolutely,
that
was
the basis
you're able
for
to like
what I did.
Think about like long-term projections versus short-term wins or losses. I mean, that can be applied to so many different areas of your life, not just like your work and your success in your career, but also like financial investment, things like this. And so that's the kind of thinking that, when our kids are not achieving in math, that they're losing out on. And it's just as important and valuable as being able to read you know, the word on a traffic ticket or the word on
Mhm.
in a cooking book or whatever it might be. I
Or
shared a
to read
link
your
in the.
mortgage, or
Oh
David,
yeah, of
as a
course.
first
Yeah.
time home buyer, right? My
Yeah.
parents, you know, they own. So my parents bought a home, and they thought God blessed them. Listen, I'm black and you brown. My parents is
Yep.
Baptist. I don't want to assume, but you probably got some Catholic in your family somewhere, right? But
Yep.
both of those folks, when you're devout, you believe in miracles. So when my mother and father had another young black person come to them right before
Yeah.
the housing crisis and say, I know this house says it's $450,000, but you only gonna pay this much. But she didn't understand what adjustable rate interest was. She didn't understand that when that arm kicked in, that stuff was gonna go up 3 or 4 fold. She thought it was just a blessing from God, and because it was another black person that gave them that, right? My parents fell
Yep.
into the housing market crisis. So when
There
I
you
get
go.
my own house and I'm trying to understand escrow and I'm understanding insurance and I'm understanding, oh, this is how my taxes work and how this happens and what percentages are, it makes a difference, man. It
Yep.
truly makes a difference. And you need a strong foundation if we're going to break the generational poverty that we're talking about breaking, if we're going to be a more logical society, if we're going to make better sound decisions.
Yep.
You need literacy and numeracy together. You ain't got to be a pro at everyone, but if you can understand the general principles of both, you can do pretty well. Like if you understand, see, you were a really good teacher, David, and so was Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown did it in the inverse. He believed in literacy. So he believed that math was inverted to literacy and literacy was inverted to math. So here's the thing. If somebody understands Latin, you actually can go a lot of places in the world and be kind of okay, right? If you know Spanish, French, English, like these major languages are rooted in Latin, you can figure some stuff out. You can figure out some text, right? You can.
Yep.
That's why when you watch a spelling bee, they'll ask for the root word, the root cause. It's the same with math. If you can understand certain principles, if you can understand the inverse nature of math, of multiplication and division or subtraction and addition, you can actually do a lot of different things. And so we need to make sure our young people have those basics so they can become functional adults in a society that is not checking for them and there's no safety net for our people. And I don't want anybody to fall into a hole the way that my parents did because they just thought that they were being blessed by God. No, man, these people are running a scam on you because he's going to get his money off top on the house sale and you're never going to see him again. You're never going to see him again. And now your house is in foreclosure.
So I want to send
a
message.
That was very personal for me. I didn't mean to go there. That was just very personal for me.
No, math, this is, I think it's powerful because what you're explaining is that there are real life implications. Like when we do not teach the core fundamentals of mathematics or mathematical thinking to young people, right? And we know, like there's all kinds of excuses in the world around like, well, I think the worst thing is that the assessments are racist, standardized testing is racist, the curriculum is racist. Some curriculum can be racist for sure. But I want to share again a story from a charter school in Oakland, right? And I just want to give some numbers. So we're talking about math. So I will provide some context in the form of numbers. Going back to what I was sharing earlier, we identified that we had a huge math problem at our school. And it was the issue was not with the children. We can't, we're not going to blame the children. We're not going to blame the schools that they had gone through before they came to us. It is our responsibility now that they are enrolled in our school to help them achieve. So the challenge now is on the adults, right? And so we got to work once we identified the problem. And like I said, we switched up our curriculum. We quickly identified technology as a companion resource alongside high quality teaching instruction, data informed instruction, ongoing and regular weekly assessment, utilizing before and after school to catch kids up. And so here are some numbers, right? And I'm reading from an abstract of a small book that that one of our math teachers wrote about, what we did at the school. It's called Solving the Math Problem. 100% of our kids were low income, Black and brown. So start there, East Oakland, right? When we made rebuilding student character our primary focus, we achieved amazing results. So we thought about the character of our students, not their inherent character, but the character that they had taken on as a result of having existed in a system that told them they couldn't do math, right? Our average score on the California Standards Test for 9th grade algebra went up from 327 to 399, raising our state placement from the 20th percentile, pretty much at the bottom, to the 99th percentile in just 3 years. I said 2 earlier. It should have been 3 years. It took us 3 years to do this, right? Where we eventually ended up being ranked 11th out of 1,377 public high schools in California, a small public charter school in East Oakland that didn't screen kids, that took in kids from the lowest performing middle schools in the state. And we did the work. So regardless of whether we're talking about Common Core or this framework or that framework, like, it's possible. And it all boils down to the fundamental belief of the adults in that building. Like, are we here to really work and serve the children? Are we here for some kind of, or do we not just believe that they can succeed? Or are we here for some, alternate purpose? And if that's your purpose, then you need to get out of education, right? And so, like, we did that, and that was within a very short period of time. It's transformation, that's innovation. And this is, none of this is made up. It's all there. You can look at the data. We just got together as adults. We were all on the same team. We were rowing in the same direction. We set goals for ourselves. We set goals for the kids, and we achieved greatness within a relatively short period of time. Once you establish that culture within a school and an organization, it sticks. That school is still one of the highest achieving high schools in Oakland and the state for low-income Black and brown kids, right? So my question to all of us is, number two questions is, like, let's talk about math the way that we talk about reading and literacy. And the second question is, like, why haven't we been doing that? We know it can be done. It's been done in certain places, whether you're a charter school or a district school. And so let's learn from those that have done it to help our young people achieve greatness.
Right. And I would just say, hopefully, if you are leaving, Jamoke, thank you for being with us. We appreciate you. I would just say, she asked a question of, can math be racist? And I think that, yes, it can be, but the way that scientific and mathematical racism plays on people is because a lot of people don't have general understanding of number sense. And let me give you an example. We, in my dissertation, in my work, in my seminal work, right, that I do around agency and the achievement tax, and I was looking at people that utilize grit, and in Duckworth's book, she talked about these statistics, and it was statistically significant. But the issue was, it was so small. It was such a small number and understanding that it's significant in the sense of, if you're talking about a world-class runner where 1/10 of a second makes a huge difference. But if you understand number sense, and we're talking about thousands, millions of kids, it tapers off a little bit in a different type of way. So there is a lot of things that people ran on, but they didn't understand the full scale and scope of what that was, right? So yeah, if I can take a number base of a place that's an impoverished area and I choose a whack control, right? I can make numbers say a lot of different things. But if you don't know how to, like, really break down the significance or understanding, like, if you can't logically kind of make sense of that stuff in your head, right? You can it's hard to call BS on certain things. And so I'm not telling everybody that they got to go, I was saying teachers not focused on student outcomes. That's true too. I'll let you answer the culturally relevant piece, but I want to finish this point just around why it's important for our communities collectively to understand this stuff. You see math every single place, and the streets should not be teaching your kids math better than schools. Let me give you an example of what I mean. When I was a kid, I remember walking down San Pablo. I remember being in West Oakland, going to the boys club. I remember being downtown. And if somebody's like, they want to sell you a zip, they want to sell you an eighth, you know, or a fifth of gin or
Yeah.
what, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, those are the places, like, when people learn about ounces and all this stuff. Like, it is when Mr. Brown said that math is the universal language, he didn't just mean across countries. He meant around different parts of life and different seas or things of that nature. My only point is, if we're losing to cats selling dope in the streets versus your kid's fifth grade class, it's setting us up. It's an indication for me that we're not headed in the right direction. I saw somebody make a point about the charter thing. David has worked in charter schools. I've worked exclusively in traditional schools and whatnot. Issues are the issue though, right? Even in private school. And I think that what I would say on the policy side of this around education and teachers, there needs to be a way to make sure that teachers can deliver and understand the new way in which we do math and be able to explain to parents and community members. They need to be able to explain to community members why it's important. So when a parent says, I don't like this dumbass new way of math, it's stupid, I'm miscarrying the one, it does us no favors for that teacher to be like, you know, you're right. What they need to be saying is, we're also going to teach how to carry the one. We're never going to not teach that. But there's 1,000 different ways that this problem can be solved. And by teaching number sense with your kids, not only are we making sure they are grasping education and grasping the content, we also want them to understand that they can come at different problems that life was going to present to them in a bunch of different ways. And they have to be able to think in that way. And I'll stop there, David, and let you answer the question from Mo.
Yes. Yeah.
Did that make
very
sense,
much.
though? I just want to make sure that made sense of what I just said.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Made sense to me. If other folks want clarification, they can chime in on the chat. I think that the piece around culturally relevant math curriculum is definitely a real thing. I tried to answer this earlier, and I'll do it again. I think the best thing that we can do to ensure that we're teaching math in a culturally relevant manner is for any teacher, regardless of their background, again, is to have a fundamental belief that any child, regardless of their background, can succeed and be successful in their class, in their school, across any subjects. So I think that's the starting point. I think when you talk about, mathematics, absolutely. Some math can be very like rote and process oriented,
right?
And that's just how it is. You gotta practice it, right, to build up that muscle, right? Thank you, Bill. And so, I think that's one part of it. I think the bigger part of it is kind of connecting with Dr. Cole is suggesting, is like, once we understand kind of the basic fundamentals of mathematics and the different functions within mathematics, is how can we translate that then into culturally, geographically, historically relevant context, right? And so now you're talking about taking abstract math functions and allowing students to use and practice those functions, solving real world, real cultural, real historical, real geography-based problems, right? Mm-hmm. That's when math comes alive, right? And that's when students can see that they can actually use math to solve problems within their own community or get better information.
Absolutely.
I think that's my, it's kind of broad. It's a general answer. But I think that's what I have for now. I did want to shout out, I'm a big believer in teachers. I'm also a big believer in technology. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure who made the comment earlier, but also a big shout out to, we had partnered at Oakland Unity with the Khan Academy, had a lot of success with them early on. But
I think that was Jamoke. I think Jamoke had your back on that one.
Yeah. And then somebody earlier gave a shout out to Zern, the Zern platform. So we're not selling any of this. We're not making a commercial, but definitely like shout out to Zern, because I know Zern, Zearn. They're working in a number of districts, probably in the millions of kids across this country. Really important during the pandemic too, for young people that didn't have access to in-person math instruction. Zern stepped in during the pandemic and helped to create a space for students to continue to develop their mathematical skills. So yeah, I appreciate the show, man. I appreciate the comments. I think, you know, we've poked the bear. We need to talk about, like I said, here's a good comment here from Nicole Johnson. Look at that right there.
Yeah, I see a goal for the Literary Society, rescue workshops for math using the methods David has proven. Then one day, English, government science, all the workshops. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, my son asked me the other day, he's in the 7th grade, and he's like, why do we only take tests for English language arts and math? And I'm like, great question. We should be focusing on science. We should be focusing on social science, right? Measure what matters. So thinking about, you know, we got to get back to a place where we're really thinking hard about, you know, the core subjects beyond math and beyond English language arts, especially given what's happening in our country right now. There isn't a more important time to be talking about things like civics, right? With climate change, science, another show. But I appreciate this conversation.
But everything you just said, and this will be my final thought, I guess, but because I can keep going on this if I didn't have to write these reports. But everything you said is also undergirded by the two things we said: literacy and mathematics. So my master's, people talk about my doctorate a lot, but people forget about I have a master's in public administration, and it's really about how you service a city, a community, you run an organization or whatnot. And there's a lot of math undergirded in that. So let me tell you how Oakland makes decisions. Oakland is split up into seven districts. They do a certain amount of polling. For people that don't know, polling is more than just you getting a phone call and getting asked some questions. It's a mathematical equation that is happening in real time. And what they do is they solve for the people that actually vote versus the people that are actually there. Let me break this down for you on a mathematical term. So while you might say we hate gentrification, we hate that they're moving out black people, that is not good for brown people, they know that a higher proportion of white, newer people that move here, taxpayers, less kids, etc., are the people that vote. So they take all those answers, regardless if the majority of people are saying whatever, they're looking at who's voting and what district they're in. And that is how they make ads. That is how they target certain things. And that is how legislation gets done. It's all math. You think that you yelling and making a big fuss about things is what's actually changing it, right? It's like, well, actually, if I understand what a voting base is, then a lot of this stuff makes more sense. Let me break this down one more layer because Jamoke said we was too deep. But I need you to understand how your town gets turned around, right? When I have in West Oakland a black chunk of people living together. See, it's okay if black people live in Oakland, but they're spread out. There isn't a mass of them, right? So if D3 used to be heavily West Oakland, which used to heavily be black people, well, we got to break that up and we got to make, you know what I'm saying? We got to make the point have more people in it, and we got to get some of them black people out of West Oakland. Now, the historically black section of Oakland is not historically black as a voting base, so things can actually change and happen. Do you understand? Like when we talk about when we got on here and you were talking about the weather, right? There's a thing called a forecast. A forecast is a mathematical term. It is when you look at available data and you look at the pattern that it has, and then you do a probability and you forecast what is actually going to come, right? That's how we know what the weather's going to be next week. The same thing happens socially. But if you don't have a math base, if you don't have a general understanding of how math is more than just a problem on a paper, but it's how we solve the world's problems, is how we get and manipulate the things that we want, these things make a lot more sense. But more importantly, it'll help you make better decisions and better understand what's happening to you. It's not that people in Oakland don't care about Oakland no more. It's that the voting populace and the people that are powerful are the people that happen to not want your kid drumming at the lake because they have voting cachet and they are the voting block. So it could still be some black people in West Oakland, but you know what we're going to do, David? We're going to cut District 3 and we're going to make sure it goes up into that new part around the lake so I can have my base there. That is where you get gerrymandering. So sorry, I just wanted to... But I wanted people to really see that connection, man. My apologies for going too deep if I did, but I love this show, man. If you got any final thoughts, I'll let you
Yeah,
go.
my final thoughts are I still feel like I'm getting to Mama Toya's question around making math culturally relevant, and so I think this is probably where we're at. Is not just teaching about math, but also teaching our young people about math was not created in a vacuum. Human beings created mathematics, right? And so looking at some of the core fundamentals of mathematics that without which we wouldn't have modern mathematics, modern science, modern engineering, all of that, right?
Wait, do you
And
mean
so
that my ancestors who made like pyramids
yeah,
and then
all
your
of that, yeah.
ancestors to where
Right.
somehow
So
we don't know how them people made pyramids in Egypt without
So
machinery, but then it also happened in Mexico? Like, is that yes you're talking about?
absolutely.
Like,
So thinking specifically about Black and brown people, right? The first recorded use of the concept of zero, and with zero, that opens up this whole other mathematical world and concept of negative, positive, the grids and everything. The first recorded zero appeared in Mesopotamia around 3 BC. Okay, so not the Mesopotamia that we know now. The Mesopotamia of then was much darker, right? The Mayans invented the concept of zero or independently around 4 AD, right? It was later devised in India in the mid 5th century. It spread to Cambodia in the 7th century and into China and Islamic countries at the end of the 8th century. So our people of color, Black and brown people, we essentially created number one, the concept of zero, which is fundamental, which modern mathematics would not exist without. Advance a little bit forward, algebra is actually was created by an individual who was a Persian man who created the concept and the numerals and the functions around algebra to help with transactions within a marketplace. His name was Al-Khwarizmi. And he was a Persian man from, I believe, what is now modern day either Iran
Egypt.
or Iraq.
Yeah, well, that area. Yeah, got you.
Yeah. And so, this is why we call this the 9th century, right? This is why we call it the South Star Classroom, focusing on making sure that we're honoring and uplifting the discoveries and the brilliance of our people. And so I think, hopefully that answered the question. And I really appreciate this conversation. We need to talk a lot more about this, obviously. We had a very good attendance today. So want to appreciate
Thank y'all so much.
The comments. Yeah.
I mean, class was in session, man. And I'll just say this. If you're a brown person and you want to feel good about yourself as far as math is concerned, go do your research in south of Mexico and southern and how they, what they did around math and how they did that. And if you Black, look up Kemet, look up what Kemet is. And like, the Greeks get a lot of credit for a lot of stuff, but they got that from somewhere. Those Greek folks came to Egypt. They came to those places in Egypt and learned that stuff. You know what I mean? They took that stuff around the world, but that stuff started there. So when we're talking about in the South Star Classroom, and I appreciate you so much, David, because it is deeper than just the curriculum changing. It is deeper than just doing math in the same old way. If we want our people to be free, you need to be literate and you need to be numerate, because when you're that, you can understand how people came over to a place where they didn't have sickness, but then these white folks gave them blankets. You got to understand math to understand how that genocide piece kind of works. You know what I'm saying? Like there are just general concepts that need to be understood. And I'll end on this. And this is my last little social.
And the biggest concept, and then you can finish, is that our people come from greatness. Go.
Our people definitely come from greatness, but also, like I said about redlining, what I said about environmental racism or whatever the case is, I'm gonna just give my liberal friends a story that some of you know and some of you may not know, but it's actually not just a literate story, it's a story of numeracy. So the South said, we got all these enslaved people, we got more people than you, and they should count as a vote. And our liberal friends said, that's not fair. The people up north said, that is not fair. They are not human. These are liberals, right? These are people that was against slavery and didn't like you. So that is where the 3/5 compromise came from. The 3/5 compromise came because voting is power, the way that I just explained it. So the same thing that's happening in Brooklyn, Chicago, and Oakland today was the topic of the day during slavery times. And what the South knew is that it was a numbers game. And they wanted all their slaves to be represented, not because they saw them as human, but because it was power. And the North, not because they saw you as human, they actually said you were an inhuman and you shouldn't count at all. So these two powerful forces, conservative, massive conservative and massive liberal, right, had a compromise about your black ass that made you 3/5 of a person because it was all about power. Now you tell me that math and numeracy don't matter and ain't in our lineage. That's David. I'm Charles. Omar is running these streets, but we all will be back next week. Same bat time, same bat station. If you like this, send us some love and share it. Peace and God bless.
Thank you.